I've been working with butterfly imagery in my work for nearly 2 decades now, and I employed it primarily in a symbolic fashion, and I was essentially just interested in the symbolism and metaphors that butterflies present. Several years ago, I was introduced by a curator to Dr. Rudy Mattoni, who is a leading lepidopterist in the United States, and he and I became fast friends, and he started to teach me about actual butterfly biology. About that time, I started to think about making an artwork that would employ live butterflies, and the image of a human figure that was filled with actual living butterflies struck me. So I started to move in that direction, and rather than simply purchase butterflies that had been bred by someone else, it became very interesting to me to think about breeding butterflies in the studio, particularly butterflies that are native to New York State and butterflies which we caught ourselves. Dr. Mattoni and I started to forage around in the neighborhoods of New York City and in my own neighborhood. I caught my very first butterfly under his tutelage. We brought these butterflies back and set up a very rudimentary system for rearing butterflies in the studio. My work has been involved with transformation for many, many years. In the simplest terms, I've been involved in working with found materials, generally things found on the streets of my neighborhood that have no apparent value. And in the last decade or so, quite a bit of work done with found aluminum cans. And these cans are crushed by traffic passing over them. They really have no value at all. My task has really been to take these worthless cast-off materials and transform them into something that has a particular meaning and has a kind of a resonance and has some aesthetic quality. That's one of the reasons the image of the butterfly has been important to me over the years, because the butterfly itself is a symbol for transformation and rebirth. And it's really the universal symbol for metamorphosis and transformation. So that my practice in the studio of transforming materials and the symbol of the butterfly have held hands very nicely. What I hope to suggest with this self-portrait figure sculpture, which contains live butterflies and releases those butterflies, kind of exhales those butterflies during the course of the day, what I'm hoping to suggest there is that there's really no separation between Homo sapiens and the rest of the natural world. We are all one. I mean, there is no difference between what happens to the flora and fauna on the planet and what happens to us. Ultimately, what happens to the butterflies is going to be our fate as well.
The most troublesome feature that we face today is the deterioration of the environment. Scientific efforts have failed to communicate this problem to the public. We got together and collaborated on how to use now living butterflies as a vehicle for touching some part of the public consciousness and morality. At the beginning of the Paleolithic era, there was only one insect that was depicted in the paintings, and they were butterflies. It's interesting to have this connotation of this great beauty of the butterfly, this touch somehow into the human, or the soul, or intuition, or whatever we mean to call it. And this is an issue that I would like to see exploited, because we have to do something to change the current situation.
One of the big takeaways for me with the butterfly machine is that it's incredibly hard to recreate a natural system in a human environment. We basically have spent a tremendous amount of time and effort trying to create a biosystem to support a handful of species of butterflies. And the minute you remove both the host plants and the butterflies from their natural environment, where they're surrounded by a kind of biodiversity that we can't even really describe, they fail to flourish, and they wind up being subject to all kinds of problems. It's proven to be far more difficult to do this than I ever imagined it would be. The butterfly machine, to me, ultimately represents a kind of dystopian vision of what the world could be like if we continue down the path of climate change and habitat destruction. I mean, we could conceivably wind up in a place where the only butterflies we see are reared in controlled environments. That the only way my 4-year-old child is going to see a butterfly when he's my age is in a controlled environment by going to some zoological display where butterflies have been reared artificially. I want to raise these kinds of concerns as an artist. My work with the image was largely symbolic, and then over time my interest has really expanded to include the actual biology and the creatures themselves. And on Dr. Mattoni's suggestion, I went to the Peruvian Amazon last summer for a Neotropical Lepidoptera field course, which was an astonishing experience. It was led by 5 of the leading lepidopterists in the world. I flew to Lima, flew to Iquitos, which is a city of 1 million people that doesn't have a road connecting it with any other major city. And then we went up the Amazon for 4 hours in a boat, stepped off the boat, walked into the jungle to a research center, took a very intensive 100-hour class in butterflies and moths. Over the last 2.5 years, become very deeply involved in witnessing the life cycles of these several species of butterflies that we're rearing now. And this is part of what I want to try to share through this exhibition.